Hi, today on Belief Busters, this is a special broadcast. I'm interrupting the regular programming because I want to talk about what's going on in our society and in our culture today. I don't know about you, but it's been a rough couple of weeks for me. Of course, we've all been dealing with the COVID and being isolated, being at home, our world's kind of topsy turvy. Working from home, having the kids at home, it's been a lot to juggle while also making sure that we have our masks and our gloves on when interacting with others. And then we are now dealing with violence on top of all of that we've been having to manage. And the violence is watching time and time again the death, the destruction, the torture of people of color. I don't think that I could have continued with our regular programming without talking about what are our beliefs around race, around humanity. And so today's podcast, I'm suggesting that we create new beliefs, or especially one new belief, that humanity is only one race. The realization that race has been designed to be labeled for one person to have power over another, for one people to have power over another. I want you to go back in time with me to when you were just a little kid. You know, you're getting around finally, you're figuring out how your legs can work and your mouth, and you're putting it all together, and you just can't wait to be seen and to see other people. Do you remember that feeling? Yeah, that feeling was just complete joy and excitement and awe about everything that you experience and everyone that you experience. That, my friends, is our truth. That is who we've really come in this world to be. To be the light, the love, the brilliance, the joy. That's our truth. And when we were in that place, we just saw each other for the truth of who and what they were. Love and light and joy. We were filled with compassion and love for whomever we interacted with. We didn't notice their color of their skin. No, we were looking for similarities, weren't we? Until we became indoctrinated into society. Now, that indoctrination first starts with our own families of origin, and they tell us what are the rules. They share their beliefs with us, how they see the world. And they share it from a place of not malice or anger or hatred. They share it from a place of how can you be successful in this system? They teach you their beliefs, hoping that you will then become a success. That's the goal. And in that indoctrination, we often mature into believing that those beliefs that we were taught are our own beliefs. Now, I've often thought to myself, well, how could people even think that way or believe that way? Because it's so different than the way that I think or believe. But as many of you know, I've been traveling around the country, the US, with my husband, Graham. And as I've traveled to different parts of the country and experienced different people's mindsets and perceptions of the world and how they live, I got to really understand that if I lived where they lived with the families, the school systems, the culture that surrounds their lives, there's no doubt that I would be thinking and feeling the same way that they did. And so, what that gives me is this ability to not stand in judgment of, not stand in hatred of, but to be in compassion for each person as human beings. If you remember going to school, one of the early lessons that we're taught is to spot the difference. Can you spot the difference? So our whole gearing is about looking for the differences. So in our society today, to say that we are colorblind is really, it's impossible. It's impossible because how we go out into the world, the first thing that we look at are differences. So when we go out into the world, we are going to notice someone's skin color, the color of their hair, the color of their eyes. It's all normal. That's normal. Ours then is to shift looking for the differences and starting to spot the similarities, allowing us to see that really we are all of the human race. We all have feelings and joys and tears and emotions. We all want to feel valued and a sense of belonging and that we matter. So, how do we start the shift from viewing the differences into looking at our similarities? I think the way that we start to shift our perceptions is by being aware of what do we believe without any judgment about what the belief is. If we are someone who judges people based on the color of their skin, I think the first instance is to acknowledge that that's what we do. And when we acknowledge that, that we don't blame or shame ourselves, that we go, oh, yeah, I see that. And then we look at, is this truly something that I want to continue perpetuating? So I'll give you my own example. If I'm walking down the street and there's a young person and they're in those baggy jeans that are kind of hanging off their bodies, my past belief is they're a thug and they're going to rob me, right? There's a danger there. And so I became aware of that bias. And then I thought, do I want to continue to judge every person that I meet that's wearing that attire as dangerous? How would it feel if I was judged based on my attire? Would I want that? And in that process, then I'm allowing myself to acknowledge what it is that I'm biased about, to feel it, acknowledge where does it come from. For me, it came from, my British ancestry about being appropriate and clothes maketh the man, my grandmother used to say. And then I get to look at that and look at that discernment. Ah, that comes from there, from my family of origin. It's really no longer appropriate because people express themselves so differently in different clothes over generations. You can see that. And I wonder then what that person is like, that individual is like. I then allow myself to be curious and to have the conversations, to say hello, to not project anger or fear when I'm passing that person or seeing that person. And then I'm so wonderfully surprised by those connections and uh, those wonderful conversations that I then am able to have. And I told you that little story because we all have biases. We cannot be educated in Western culture and not have biases. We are trained to have them. And now we are at a turning point in our life where we can make the distinction to change those biases, to really look and say, does this bias make sense? Is it mine? Can I release it? And when I release it, what do I want to create then? A lot of the conversations that I've been hearing over the weekend from spiritual leaders and people in the movement for civil rights harkens back to the civil rights movement of the 60s and Martin Luther King's words. He was very eloquent. And while that is powerful, and it was a powerful point in our time, in our consciousness, we are at another significant point in our consciousness that today we have the choice to understand our brothers and sisters, understand that we were taught rules and regulations, what's right, what's wrong, and then realizing that those rules and those laws, they don't apply equitably across the land. That there's one rule if you are of the majority, and then there's another rule if you're a person of color. And then understanding that if you're a person of color that has been subjugated by those rules for generations, for times, for your own life experiences, that perhaps we have come to realize that those laws are no longer applicable. So when you talk about seeing the violence and that's not the way to respond, perhaps you're right. But imagine being under those rules and regulations and laws and being punished so severely until the pressure just blows. And you wonder, well, why am I in agreement with these rules that are not for me? Why would I adhere to the laws of the land that are not for me? We have an opportunity to change the laws. We have an opportunity to create a system in this country that is for everyone, that truly brings equality to the forefront, where everyone is included, everyone is at the table, everyone has a right to sit there, to be valued, and to be respected. You know, I had a conversation with a really good friend of mine who I adore and I love. And they were talking about their teenage son who was caught by the police in a construction site and they were smoking marijuana. And they were telling me about, you know, that person's experience, their son's experience, and how horrifying that is. And as they're describing what happens, I'm so aware of the difference of treatment between a white teenager and a Black man of color. So the white teenagers are hanging out at the construction site. They're hanging out at the construction site. They're smoking. Neighbor calls the cops, and the cops sit them on the pavement, talk to them a couple hours, and they have court dates. Not arrested, not shot, not tortured. and they go home to their parents. Now, their parents have to deal with all of the court system, justice system issue. But I'm pointing out that the difference in the way that those in authority treat people differently. A person of color just running through the construction site can be chased down and gunned down and killed. A person passing a counterfeit bill of color is tortured and killed. The rules have to be the same across the board for us to be a society that supports and loves each other. So if you're feeling afraid by the violence that you see on the streets, I understand that. And what are you going to do to change the rules and laws of the land? So how we treat each other is the treatment that we'll receive from each other, right? If we treat each other like animals, then the response that you're going to receive from that person that you treat as an animal is going to be animalistic. If you treat that person with love, dignity, and respect, the response that you'll get back is love, dignity, and respect. Whatever we are inside is what's being shown to us on the outside. Racism has been around for a very long time. You may have become complacent, believing racial issues are over. It's a thing of the past. It ended at the time of MLK, or maybe after Mr. Obama became president. Racism is there. And what's wonderful about this time is that all the shadows are in the light. It's all up, waiting for us to heal it and to create anew. So the choice is yours. What are you going to create to make this world a place where everyone thrives?